This episode is brought to you by Buick. When you have 4 new tires, every drive feels fresh. Right now, buy 3 select tires and get 1 for just $1 during the Buick Certified Service Fresh Start Tire Event. Visit Buick.com/service offers or see dealer for full details. At participating U.S. GM dealers only, highest or equal value tire will be $1. Offer ends 5/31/2025. Not available with other offers.
Halliday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Halliday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Halliday. Halliday, bring it on.
This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injuries and additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
Week 3 of the election is behind us. It wasn't a kind one for Mark Carney and the Liberals as they suspended their campaign again after some difficult questions. But as Week 3 ends, Week 4 begins, and we look forward to the debates on Wednesday and Thursday. Hello, I'm Brian Lilly, and this is the Full Comment Podcast. And as we've been doing throughout the election, we're going to break down what's happened, look ahead to what might happen, or what the parties need to do. One of the big stories that kicked off the beginning of Week 3 didn't come from another political party attacking Mark Carney and the Liberals. It came from bureaucrats in Ottawa telling the public that China is once again interfering in our elections. They're putting forward evidence of a bunch of stories and coordinated activities on WeChat by accounts tied back to the Chinese government. Liberal leader Mark Carney asked about this, said he didn't know why China was backing him.
From my understanding, some of the campaign was pushing positive narratives about you. Why do you think that China, the PRC, seems to like you? Why are they praising you?
I have absolutely no idea, and I have absolutely no idea, and I think I'll leave it at that.
Joining me now to talk about all of this are the two people behind the Political Hack newsletter from National Post. Please do hit subscribe. Stuart Thompson, the Ottawa bureau chief for National Post, and columnist Tasha Kiridan. Was it a surprise to either one of you about China interfering? I mean, we've heard about India interfering in the Conservative leadership race, but this is China again coming out and deciding, okay, this is our guy.
The thing that I first thought when I heard about all this is it reminded me of the 2016 situation with Trump when Russia was supposedly meddling in his favor in the election, and it came out that actually they were trying to meddle in his favor. But then when you actually dig down to what they were actually doing, it's weird stuff. It's like memes and weird tweets and strange stuff. And I actually, so that you don't have to, I actually read this article that this it was apparently boosted by the Chinese government on WeChat. It's like one of them is a 2,000-word feature on Mark Carney. It's just the strangest thing, and it's written really strangely. It has good moments and bad moments. And if you were just reading that in isolation, you would think, what are they trying to do here? It's just the oddest thing. And there was another article much more flattering to Carney that was boosted. Millions of people apparently saw this, but now after the press conference this week and after the sort of public revealing of this, these posts have gotten even more, they're going even more viral. So you can actually see this is such a really interesting microcosm of the oddness and the actual difficulty in responding to this to the authorities, because this task force, they've committed to being more transparent and being committed to saying these things when they see them. But you always wonder, this would have flown under the radar pretty much if they hadn't mentioned it, and now it's actually more public. They have hard decisions to make, and a lot of this stuff isn't as cut and dry as you think it is.
Tasha, I read these articles as well, and some of them are just, looks like a positive article you could see in Canadian media, but it's the coordination in the background with the ties to these organizations directly controlled by Beijing, boosting them and pushing them. And that's the weird part.
Weird? Why is this weird? I'll tell you. If I'm in the Chinese consulate, here's what I'm thinking. The commission's report, the Hague Commission, definitely raised the flag on foreign interference. And the kind of interference that they were discussing was negative interference. If you recall, in the last elections, interference against candidates, slandering them on WeChat and Weibo. So negative stuff, comments being made, designed to suppress the vote. This is the opposite. So if I'm sitting there with Chinese consulate, I'm like, okay, what is not okay to do? Slam, slander, attack. But promoting good stuff, well, how is that wrong? Right?
Well,
it's a bizarre. I'm putting myself in their head.
Negative. They did the negative on Chrystia Freeland in January.
Well, they did in the leadership race.
And at the same time, as I just recently reported, they have, at the same time, they were starting to boost Mark Carney as early as the leadership race. So they slammed her and promoted him.
Right. They didn't need to slam her too hard. She got, 8%? So, clearly that didn't really do much there. But I think they did. They went negative on her in a leadership race, right? Where there is arguably less scrutiny. This is not a national election. There's scrutiny still, but the Hague Commission, the interference in our electoral processes, it was very narrow, right? It was about Canadian elections. And so there you had things like nominations. You had things like, actual elections during the writ period. So again, if I was a very literal bureaucrat in the CCP sitting there going, what can we do? What can we not do? I would say, well, promoting good things. How is that bad? So I know it sounds ridiculous because it's interference one way or the other, but that will catch less flack for saying the guy's a good guy, right? We're not telling people, we're not warning people not to vote for the other person. We're just saying he's great, and we're amplifying that message. So it puts the Liberals in a bind because they want to amplify the message he's a great guy, right? They're not.
They're saying things like he's a pragmatist, he's a realist, he can reset China-Canada relations. Ooh, that's bad.
Right, but this is the thing. So it's a different. What they're doing is very clever because the Liberals, if the Liberals come out and slam this and say, well, we don't want good things said about us, it's hard to say that with a straight face. Plus, you want good things said about you. So this is the problem. I'm not justifying it. I think it is wrong either way. It is interference, but it's clever interference. And that is why Carney, as a politician who's not very experienced, I think is also not twigging to it. He doesn't get it, unfortunately.
Do you remember that until recently he said, I'm not a politician?
Correct.
This week there was a report out from the Globe and Mail, Bob Fifes, Stephen Chase. I mean, we all know them, both superb journalists, thorough. And it wasn't even the focus of their story, but they pointed out that Carney, during the Liberal leadership, had met with these guys from an organization called the JCCC. It's a group that's supposed to promote ties between Canada and China. But it's also described as a proxy group for Beijing associated with the United Front Works Department, which is the Chinese government's agency for influence and intimidation outside of China. So they report this, and Carney doesn't like being asked about China, and he doesn't like asked about his taxes. We'll talk about that in a minute. Here is his response to a woman from the Globe and Mail who had to go and ask him a follow-up for her colleagues' questions.
So in your question, and I guess in the article in question, you said I had a meeting with whatever your term was, Beijing group. I've never heard of this group, okay? Never heard of this group. Certainly didn't have a set-up meeting with this group. Full stop. So check your sources before you write things like that, okay? Or your colleagues do.
Okay, so bad on several fronts. I'll start with you, Tasha. This is about the third time that he's gone really nasty on a reporter, and each time it's been a woman. Does that strike you as odd? He's nastier to women than he is to men in terms of his tone. And, Rosemary, look inside yourself, things like that.
Lying to me now, because Mom, look inside yourself. We had such a laugh over it. It's stuck in our household. Yes, he has been much more testy with female reporters. I have seen that. He's also been testy on the issue of China. Again, I think this goes to not making excuses, but explanation, is he comes from a world where, and a generation where, people wanted to build relationships with China. You know, the Jean Chrétien, Team Canada, let's go to China, David Johnston. The concept of elite capture was not discussed at the time the way it is today. And so this whole thing of like, well, you know, I was in the same room with these people. I meet 1,000 people at an event and they take a picture with me. That's basically the gist, like you said. Like, it's, you know, it's like, what's the big deal here? Where's the there? He doesn't get that there's the there because he doesn't have that frame. He has to change that. That's very worrisome, mind you. The Prime Minister has to get that. So he has to either get with that program, or else he's going to have a problem with the United States, as we raised before, who are not happy with China, who are engaged in a trade war with China. It will ricochet and rebound on us. So he's got to get with that program to understand, you're nice to China or you excuse this stuff. Washington is not going to be happy with you, and the rest of Canada will suffer as a result.
Well, a couple of things, if I can make a few points,
Please
and
do.
then I'll hand it back. Sorry, that's my Carney imitation.
I'm good.
So I get your point of him being politician and taking pictures. You know, as I said, he didn't used to call himself a politician. Now he's a politician when he's asked about these photos. And I'm always willing to forgive a politician for these grip and grins where you don't know who the person is. I was just up at the Canada Strong and Free conference, saw Stuart walking through the halls. He ignored me. I waved. But I was having people grab me everywhere. You know, can I get a photo? Can I get a photo?
Stop bragging, Brian. Seriously.
I'm not doing a CSIS background check on these folks. And that's what it is for politicians. But if a whole group came up to me and they wanted photos in front of flags, because he didn't just take photos with one or two of them. There's a team photo with the whole group. I might say, oh, who do you guys play for? And he doesn't appear to have done that. He said that he didn't know who this group was, that he never met with them. Immediately, Steve Chase tweets out photos. Here you go. I think that that's why he decided to suspend his campaign, Stuart. I'd like your thoughts on that. He suspended his campaign on Thursday, went back to Ottawa to play prime minister, saying Trump is doing something, except Trump's actually being quiet. So do you think it's, you know, one led to the other?
Yeah. Sorry, Brian. In my defense, I was missing a phone cable and I was highly focused on striding through the hallway to go get one. Apologies. This, I think, is an interesting question, because my conspiracy theory on this is that this was all planned. So when the writ dropped, they were thinking, we're going to campaign a little bit, then we're going to come back and we're going to look like prime minister, and we're going to put the tie on again and look serious, and then we'll go out to some rallies, and then we'll come back. I think that is exactly what they were planning to do. And part of the reason is there isn't barely even a flimsy pretense for it this week. Like the first week, there was some Trump stuff going on. The second week, the actual tariffs came through. Like that is a justifiable reason to play prime minister for a couple of days. This week, it's just, we just wanted to do it, you know?
we don't have anything to do on a Friday.
And I think you are right, though, that one of the secondary strategies is that Carney is probably the front runner right now. He's a newbie politician, and the less exposure he gets on any given day, the better for them. So when I was on the trail with them, 15 to 20 minutes of questions, and then they wrapped that up super quick. And there was only one day where they went a little longer, and it wasn't much longer. And I think actually we just accidentally got local reporters' questions. It wasn't even intended. So they are wrapping this up as quickly as they can. And I think part of that strategy is, you know, when you're playing prime minister, you can do a 2-minute media availability, 1 minute in French, 1 minute in English, and then go about your business because you're so busy at your cabinet meeting. I think...
Well, that's exactly what he did. Let's play that right here.
We had a good, long discussion on several aspects. The first is the general situation. In the last week, there have been a lot of developments in terms of U.S. tariff policy, reactions from others, including China, really marked tightening in financial conditions, a slowing, the initial signs of slowing in the global economy, impacts that we're starting to see unfortunately in the Canadian economy, particularly in the Canadian labor market. We reviewed our response to those tariffs, our core strategy of to fight, to protect, and to build. We left instructions for officials to ensure that the next government, whichever government Canadians choose, will be in the best possible position for negotiations with the United States, which, as the President and I have agreed, will begin from the start of May.
So he had a big cabinet meeting. That's all he said. We're working on things.
Yeah.
Okay. Not even any questions. Tasha, do you think that do you think that Stuart's right, that they always planned it this way, or that they looked at the last few days being asked about his offshore tax havens, being asked about China, and they're like, we should take this guy off the road because it's not going so well?
I don't know if it was because of those things. I tend to agree with Stuart. I think that campaigns evolve too. You start out with a plan, and then you do, events happen, and you have to adjust. And I think what they're adjusting to is the fact that he's not a good politician right now. He needs a ton of practice, and some people don't have that natural ability to, speak in shorter sound bites or, be that friendly with every smile when they don't feel like it. Like he's new to this, and it shows big time. So I think they realize that more and more as the campaign's gone on. So the strategy, which I agree was probably play prime minister, it's great. It definitely helps them. It gives them a boost. And then, adjust and mix it up accordingly. I will be as cynical as to say they did that this week on purpose. But if they did, it was smart. I mean, they have that luxury, right? He's got that card to play. He can be prime minister because he is prime minister. Poilievre does not have that card. So if I was a strategist, I'd be like, sure, let's play that card. I think that, though, he can't abuse it because you're right. If there's no reason to, people will start to say, well, that's pretty thin.
You're hiding.
So it has its limits as well, but it does shield him from the nitty gritty and day to day. And, it's interesting. Radio Canada, who I also comment for, my second love politically here, apart from the National Post, they did a tally of how many questions all the candidates answered. And they said that Pierre Poilievre's answered the least, about 80. Carney's answered double that, 160. And then Jagmeet and Singh and Yves-François Blanchet were off the charts. They were like over 250 or something. That's because they're fighting for media attention. The other guys are hiding it. Exactly that. They're like, less is more, right? And so, but, the Conservatives are the actual worst on that. So Carney's kind of in the middle.
After having done this for as long as I have, I don't like really long news conferences where the questions go on and on, because eventually I'm like, okay, we've heard enough from you. I want to go work. Yeah. I need to write, and I need to pick which of these 15 topics you've talked about. So you guys may differ.
Totally agree.
But that's the way I am.
It's too short. I think the Poilievre 4 questions is a little,
I would do more.
Too short there. Yeah.
He used to do 5, and Trudeau did 15 minutes. And it would work out to about 5 questions because of the repeat everything in English and French. But yeah, Carney is going on longer and with more questions. But, we saw some of those coming out about his investments, the other issue that he's very touchy about. This week, it was Grand Cayman. He has... we knew about the 2 funds in Bermuda, and then I don't know if it was CBC or CTV broke the story, one of them, that there was a third one, and it's in a building that Barack Obama once complained about as home for tax cheats in the United States. I think this is from 2011, where he's calling it the biggest tax scam ever.
On the campaign, I used to talk about the outrage of a building in the Cayman Islands that had over 12,000 businesses claim this building as their headquarters. And I've said before, either this is the largest building in the world or the largest tax scam in the world.
Yeah, so back then it didn't have as many. Now I understand it's 18,000 businesses registered at this one address. It's like the one in Bermuda. It's above a bike shop. That's the home of a $50 billion fund. He doesn't like answering those questions. I asked him about his personal taxes for a column I wrote for The Sun this past week. And I just said, look, from 2020 through 2024, which country did you pay your personal income taxes in? Not asking how much you made, how much you paid, just which country, which I think is a valid question. He worked all over the world, lived all over the world, has 3 passports. So if you're going to be all elbows up for Canada, tell us. And they just said Mark Carney follows all the rules. Doesn't tell you much. Can you really be elbows up when you move your company headquarters to New York City, you register your companies in Bermuda and Cayman Islands, and you won't say where you pay your personal income taxes? Tasha, I see you smiling.
Oh, you're doing a Paul Martin on him, aren't you? Your ships are registered in Panama, and you're moving money offshore. You know what? Here again is where Mark Carney, the business guy, butts up against Mark Carney, the politician. Because in the business world, this is not an unusual practice. They're, moving your head office so that you can qualify to be on a particular stock exchange, but you're not transferring actual people. It's a paper, it's an office, an address, is routine business. Having these companies registered in this particular building of the 18,000, the reason is because there is a company that has its office there that registers companies for this particular location, and that's the address they give it. And, I've seen companies who've done this, having, been in the consulting universe, and it is following the rules. It is nothing where Canada allows people to do this. So does the US. There's nothing bizarre about having 18,000 things. It might sound like it to the average person. And this is why Carney looks at this and goes, well, why are you asking me this? Because in my world, this is fine. But the politician, I agree with you. Politicians are held to a different standard. And that's where the problem is. He's got to learn to say, if he can't say he pays his taxes in Canada, you can pretty much bet he didn't, right? Like omission, lie by omission, or say nothing by omission. So he's got to get better. He's got to get better at dealing with this and either owning it or saying, you know what? Yeah, as a politician, I'll do differently, or I will. He could do a lot of things, but he is not handling it well. I agree.
Or stop saying companies need to pay their fair share. And then another benefit of moving the company headquarters to New York City, by the way, is a change in tax to American taxes. So the company is paying less tax in Canada now because of that. They're paying less tax because the funds are in Bermuda or Grand Cayman. Maybe standard practice, but when you're lecturing saying, companies need to pay their fair share, we're going to increase taxes on companies, that's a really bad message.
Well, that's the disconnect. That's exactly what I'm saying, is that he has to become the politician as opposed to still, accepting, he has to reconcile the two. Yet there is a way to reconcile the two, which is when I did this, I was this, and now I'm this. And I agree companies have paid their fair share. And that's why we need to reform the tax code. That's all he needs to say. I agree. I think, we should, I've seen these rules and you know what? Yeah, I think we should reform them. He doesn't have to say what they'll do, but he has to have that instinct to pivot. He doesn't have the pivoting instinct. Communications 101.
Stuart, your thoughts on this tax angle?
Yeah, that's the Trump argument, right? That I know all the loopholes, so I'm the guy who can close them. And that's just Carney doesn't.
That's why Trump is a better politician. Yeah. You remember that clip with him and Hillary. You guys wrote the rules, I followed them.
And this is what confuses me the most about this moment. And I kind of understand that Trump he infects everything, and that you can't have a normal politics with Trump inserting himself into it. But the idea that Mark Carney, who I think is genuinely and self-admittedly like a global citizen, a guy who is used to these worlds, self-identifies as elite, he's technocratic, he speaks like a technocrat, he's got a policy to make you live your life better because he knows how you should be living your life. This kind of attitude is like anathema to what people are feeling right now coming out of a liberal government. And if you'd said to me 6 months ago, we're going to bring this guy in and be the liberal leader, and he's going to tell you things like this, and he's going to be, putting his funds in Bermuda and avoiding taxes and wearing his suits and stuff like that, I would have said, how could the Conservatives lose this? But this is just not a normal election. I think this is probably the best version of that, because we talked about last time, his French sucks, but Quebecers love him. And he's in this moment, the kind of guy who puts funds in Bermuda to avoid taxes, and people don't seem to care at all. And I think that just shows you how enveloping the Trump factor is right now.
I think that sums it up. Okay, we need to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll switch gears, start talking about Pierre Poilievre. Big endorsement for him last week from someone that won't surprise anyone, but it was a ringing endorsement. Some tough questions for him on the campaign trail, including, does size matter?
episode is brought to you by Temptations Cat Treats. Your cat will come running for the perfectly irresistible Temptations Creamy Puree and Temptations Lickable Spoon Cat Treats. The best time to feed lickable cat treats to your cat is anytime. Feed by hand for a playful moment, in a bowl for a creamy treat, or as a topper to make mealtime fun. Visit temptationstreats.com to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
Anyone can follow. It takes something special to be an original, which is why the 2025 Lincoln Navigator SUV arrives with new ways of surrounding you in luxury, including the ultra-wide 48-inch panoramic display and the multi-sensory Lincoln Rejuvenate experience. A true original never stops evolving. So meet the 2025 Navigator, the original that's all new and better than ever. Learn more at Lincoln.com. Lincoln and Navigator are trademarks of Ford or its affiliates.
This is Tristan Harper, the host of Canada Did What?, where we unpack the biggest, weirdest, and wildest political moments in Canadian history you thought you knew and tell you what really happened. Stick around at the end of the episode to hear a sample of one of our favorite episodes. If you don't want to stick around, make sure you subscribe to Canada Did What? Everywhere you get podcasts.
You know, friends, I am in a unique position in this federal election. I am the only person who can say that both of the men running to be Prime Minister once worked for me. And in that regard, my choice, without hesitation, without equivocation, without a shadow of a doubt, is Pierre Poilievre.
No one should be really shocked that Stephen Harper endorsed Pierre Poilievre at the giant rally in Edmonton. 15,000 people. Yay! No one should be shocked by that, but it was a pretty ringing endorsement. It was emphatic. And I thought he had a really interesting point there, Stuart, where he just said, I've worked with both of them. They've both worked for me, and I'm picking Pierre.
Yeah, I think you could see in that moment that some of Carney's resume enhancement stuff has bugged Harper a little bit. You could see that it was definitely something he wanted to refute in that speech. And
well, one of his lines was, I hear there's another guy claiming he led Canada through the 2008-2009 crisis.
There's nothing more annoying, I think. Like, I think most Canadians understand that, like, the macroeconomic stuff comes from the fiscal side, and that I think Harper particularly feels like I think he writes in his book that it was his 50th birthday. He had to bail out the auto sector. And, you know, as a lifelong movement conservative, that's a tough decision to make. So this was tough stuff for Harper. I think it bugs him to see Carney going around taking credit. But the speech I thought was great. It was only about 8 or 9 minutes long. And I had two thoughts. One was that it was really well done. And I think I talked to some conservatives about it, and they were saying, you know, we know that the boomers, the older voters, are drifting towards Carney. I think they kind of see older women as a lost cause as far as getting them to the polls. Tasha agrees. And
as an older woman, I will say, not a boomer. But
I would never say that about you.
I'm an Xer.
Yeah, the Gen Xers and the boomers. But I think what they were trying to do was some of those older men who really appreciated Harper and look back on those years with fondness, they would see Stephen Harper and say, that's right, maybe we do want to return to those days. The other thought I had, which I think is a little concerning for Poilievre, is that Harper was actually able to capture the tone that was necessary, the tone that Poilievre has been trying to get, but I think it's eluded him a little bit. But I thought that Harper got up there and in about 8 or 9 minutes delivered the perfect speech for it.
Maybe Stephen Harper should start writing Poilievre speeches then. I'll tell you this about Stephen Harper. He always had speechwriters while he was PM, and he rewrote everything down to the last minute. Yeah, he'd be like, "No, give me it again," and he'd make changes. So there's no doubt in my mind that he either wrote or rewrote that one. And you mentioned his 50th birthday bailing out GM. The day they announced that here in Toronto at the Marriott on Bay, I was one of two people that they pulled in to interview. They wanted two Toronto media outlets, broadcast outlets, to do the interview. So CTV Toronto got one, and I was at News Talk 1010. I walk into the room, and I had never seen the man so foul mood than that day, because he hated what he was doing, but had to be done. And, that's what you need to do in a moment. That's why he was a good leader, and I hope whoever gets in, in those moments, goes against what they want to do for what has to be done. Doug Ford did that during the pandemic, I think. Went too far on a bunch of things, but he found the moment, and you need that. And that's a quality that right now we can't detect in any of these leaders. It's not until they're in that moment. In terms of his endorsement, Tasha, what were your thoughts on it? Does it move the needle? I know it doesn't for you, as an older woman, a term I never would have used for you until you kept using it.
It's fine. It's fine. Okay, so I have a couple thoughts on it. It can cut both ways, because reaction I heard from people, one was, oh, they're desperate, they're losing, they're bringing out Stephen Harper. Just like they brought out Caroline Mulroney in Ontario to get the red Tory vote, to look to those women, exactly that, the red Tory, older women, Xers, generation perhaps boomers, to say, you know what, my father, Brian Mulroney, who is like even more, paterfamilias to the conservatives Ontario, I would think, than Harper was, that he loves Pierre, and I'm a friend of Pierre. Not saying I'm endorsed, I'm a friend. Like it was very personal. And Harper, a few days later, same thing in Western Canada, coming out and doing the blessing, Godfather blessing you. That whole thing was designed to evoke a sense of, say, political nostalgia, but also credibility, to your point. Harper has never refuted offering Carney the job of finance minister. He's had ample opportunity to do that if it's true, but he did not. He has not. That is still out there. That's still hanging out there. I think that's one of the reasons he did what he did, and he said what he said about Carney, but he's never refuted that. So if you go by what we're saying before, by omission, maybe he did, probably did. Like, why would Carney lie about that? It's easily refutable. The point is, though, that I think the campaign felt it needed to neutralize Carney from a higher level than simply slagging him on social and having, Pierre slagged him personally for his haircut. That was stupid. I mean, Pierre's haircut leaves a lot to be desired, frankly, but, really, don't go after that stuff. It's dumb.
We're men. We have bad hair.
No, but that's what
All
I mean.
of us.
Is like, no, it was a cheap shot. And that's what they shouldn't do. The Harper thing was good because it was not a cheap shot. It was a high level shot. And from a person with intense gravitas. So I think it was a positive for the Conservatives. I think that right now, you look at the polls, they're moving. They're moving. The Conservatives, the gap is narrowed, and the Liberals are now in minority territory, according to the last polls I saw, which doesn't totally surprise me. I think that a campaign does matter, and people are taking a hard look at what's on the table and making a judgment based on a multiplicity of factors they wouldn't have known at the beginning of this campaign.
Well, I always say voters are fickle, polls can change, campaigns matter. And we've seen that a couple of times this year. So the backstory on Harper offering up the job of finance minister to Carney.
Were you in the room on this, Brian?
No.
It's like spooky stuff? I want to know.
No, and I didn't get this directly from Stephen Harper. But he's told me some other things about cabinet ministers over the years, why some stayed, why some left. But so I talked to some of his people on background, and what they said was that Harper knew that Carney was sniffing around the Liberal leadership, and that he decided, okay, he's either got to be on our team or not be on our team. And so they decided to suss him out and say, you've heard the stories of after the 2011 election defeat, I think it was summer of 2011, Carney went down to Scott Bryson's cottage in Nova Scotia and spent a week down there as they kicked around this idea. Who's on Carney's campaign bus with him? Scott Bryson.
Yeah, they're pals.
Yeah, they're great pals. So he was looking at running for the Liberal leadership after Iggy left and wanted to do it. And Harper offered him the job to basically say, shit or get off the pot.
I heard the spin too. I honestly don't believe that. You don't need to go as far as to offer that. Plus, Diana Fox Carney, his wife, was the chair of Canada 2020. They have been close to the Liberals in many ways as a couple, for a long time. So I think that, honestly, what you're just telling me, I've heard that spin too. I don't buy it.
Yeah, we'll put the story out there, see what the audience thinks. They can enjoy it or not. But so they've been able to get Caroline Mulroney on board, and I'm sure if Brian Mulroney were alive, he'd be out there for him, just like Chrétien. Chrétien's back out for Carney and doing more for Carney than he did ever for Trudeau, but that's because he actually hears from Carney and never heard from Trudeau. Those two did not get along. But should Pierre Poilievre, and we'll play the clips of the Corey tonight and Poilievre reacting to it, but should Poilievre have done more before this election to mend fences, build bridges, whatever you want to use, with people like Doug Ford and Patrick Brown? Because that rally in Brampton was big the other day. But Patrick Brown, who has a huge political machine in Peel Region, they did not reach out to Patrick Brown for that Brampton rally. They have not asked for Patrick Brown's support to help candidates in Peel Region. They did nothing with Doug Ford. I think this was a big mistake for the Poilievre campaign. You don't have to love each other, but if you're on the same team or you're 80% friends, 50% friends even, work together.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that you hear from Conservatives, and it was pointed out to me as something I hadn't fully noticed, but somebody pointed out to me at that Edmonton rally. I mean, you've got about 20 Conservative MPs attending that thing, and Harper was the star of the show, and Poilievre was the main act, and nobody mentioned or shouted out or brought on stage any of the MPs. And I think that if you hear a sort of consistent criticism from Conservatives, people on the campaign or people outside the campaign, it's that it's a one-man show or it's a two-person show, Poilievre and Aneda doing their thing. And sometimes they've got Jenny Byrne in the background doing her thing, but they don't actually go outside that circle. And I think this is maybe just the nature of Poilievre's personality. He's very single-minded. He's a policy guy. He'd rather be crunching numbers than shaking hands and talking to people. And I think that, you know, the 2 years where they were 20 points clear gave them such confidence in their plan. And that is, anyone who expressed an objection or a different point of view would be met with that answer of, look, we're 20 points clear. Like, how are you going to come here and tell us how to run our show? And I think they're still in that mindset a little bit. And, you know, that comes down to relationships. It comes down to, are you calling Doug Ford right after he gets elected and making sure that he's on side, or at the very least he's neutral to you? Because if he's against you, that's a real problem. And I think if you were sort of rerunning all of this the last 2 years, that might be the thing, if you're a Conservative, that you would change, is that there was more outreach, there was more kind of sensitivity to other concerns.
Tasha, you were part of that leadership race.
I was. I tell you.
I mean, Charest is a guy that he could be leaning on in Quebec, but he's not, as far as I know. Is Charest out there speaking up for the Conservatives?
Why should he, with the way that everyone involved in this campaign is treated by the leadership currently? And I will say, I have, apart from personal experience, which I'm not going to belabor that, but I have heard from so many people. In fact, even recently, candidates, people who are potential candidates, past candidates, Pierre doesn't need you. That was actually said to a woman who has been a candidate for the party and wanted to potentially be a candidate again, someone who would have been an excellent one. Pierre doesn't need you. If you're not in his inner circle, you're not in his inner circle. I get that. But I can remember asking one of his key strategists after leadership was over, is when's Pierre going to come to the Albany Club and talk to people? Never. Laughing. That's not our thing, because that's not the people they talk to. I mean, they'll take their money. And that's been their attitude from the beginning. So if you're 20 points up, it doesn't matter. But they're not now. They're not. Guess what?
Not going to the Albany Club in Toronto. I think it's the only club of its type, private club, that is specific to one party.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of history.
Yep.
Every leader since Sir John A. Macdonald has been there.
Yep.
And yes, you're going to meet the people who fund the party on a regular basis. Guess what? That's part of the gig.
It is. It is part of the game. But, they didn't play that way. And the goal was because, the Albany Club is elitist, right? And we're going to not be that. But it's more than that. It is, Patrick Brown. I mean, if you saw the scorched earth politics that was played during leadership with Patrick Brown, I don't have to remind you. The attitude is that if you're not with us, you're against us, and we are going to crush you, and that's it. And we're not going to talk to you later. And they did not. They did not talk to people in those campaigns. They did not. Trust me, outreach. It was never part of their plan because that was not the crowd they wanted to in terms of voters, and they didn't want to have trouble. They don't want people who tell them things they don't want to hear or don't follow the program. And you look at a lot of the candidates they put in, since then, they've been people who are very loyal to Pierre, and that's how they built their team. So, like I said, it worked for them. They were 20 points up, and now they're not. And the big tent, there's two theories on conservative politics. There's the big tent, right, which is more, you got to water your wine, you got to make compromises. Those red Tories over there, you may not like some of what they say, but you're going to make an effort to keep them happy. Or there is we're going to just cut those loose. We're going to focus on the base. We're going to have a different base, more working class base, more whatever you want to call it. We're going to identify with a different ethos and change the party to what we want it to be. And we're going to win with that because people hate Trudeau. And that's what they went with. But now Trudeau's not there. Oops.
So tonight did go off again. Curse the Politics podcast.
I know I've got a bad name with some people in the Conservative Party for pointing out at the beginning of the campaign that, the election has pivoted towards Trump. That was true in December. It was true in December. And I know because, I was running a campaign for Doug Ford in which we were doing polling and we're listening to that polling. And that was true in December. And it was true in January and February and March, right? But I see no evidence that they have actually polled and that they are actually following polling and research and anything that is even remotely conventional in how you manage a campaign. And that's why they're losing. And they're losing. Let's just pause and point out they have blown a 25 point lead. Which is you want to talk, we talk sometimes about campaign malpractice. Blowing a 25 point lead and being 10 points down is campaign malpractice at the highest level. And I'm sorry to have to point that out, conservatives, but that is the actual reality.
And then he went on CTV after that. Then Pierre was asked about this issue again. I know this was 2 weeks ago when this first came up, but it came up again. Here's his answer on why he's not just focusing on Trump.
Stephen Harper's former director of communications says, quote, blowing a 25-point lead and being 10 points down is campaign malpractice at the highest level. Is it campaign malpractice?
No, I answered that question 2 weeks ago. Liberals and lobbyists want me to stop talking about high food prices. Well, I'm not going to do that because single mothers shouldn't be going to bed hungry, worried about how they're going to feed their kids in the morning. They want me to stop talking about the doubling housing costs during the lost Liberal decade. I'm not going to stop talking about that. They want me to stop talking about the rampaging crime that's overtaking our streets and the overdose crisis Liberals caused that has taken the lives of 50,000 people. I will not stop talking about that either. After the lost Liberal decade of rising costs and crime and a falling economy under America's thumb, we can't afford a fourth Liberal term.
All right, so we can look at the campaign guys and, Corey's calling it campaign malpractice, but in making it sound like they're definitely going to lose. They might. If things stay as they are, they will. But it's, as you said, Tasha, some closing of the gap. And at best, it is a 6 to 7 point margin with the debates still to come. Who's right on this? Is it Tanaik who says you should only focus on Trump? I know that's your main issue. Pierre does talk about Trump. Should he only be focused on that and forget talking about affordable housing that so that your kids can move out and get a house one day or find a good job or have a life?
I think that the can do both. I think the fundamental miscalculation was that they didn't have to do the first one. And they just kept hammering. And that goes to what we were saying earlier, is that they have a way of doing things, and that's what they want to do. And they will do it. And if it works, it works, it works, it works. It worked, like I said, until Trudeau was gone, until Trump was there, and then Carney came in. Of those three things, there's only one variable that can change now, and that's Carney. So basically, this is Carney's election to lose, and we have seen him make a lot of mistakes on this campaign, and I think that explains partly why the gap is closing, because people are getting to know him, and some people are like, at first, yes, now, maybe not so much. So the conservatives have boxed themselves in to this, this focus on the issues that worked for them. They didn't pivot early enough. I agree with Corey. Blowing a lead like that is campaign malpractice. The reason they blew it, though, is because they were rigid and they didn't anticipate scenario 1, 2, 3. They didn't do that. And they should have done that at some point. They had a long time because people knew this was coming. Trudeau was not going to be there. Most pundits said he's not going to be around.
I did not until
I did.
Just before, because followed this guy since he was elected in 2008. I thought his ego would not allow it. He really wanted a fight with Pierre Poilievre. He wanted to show he could beat Skippy. That's what he wanted to do. That's what the Liberals call him. He wanted to beat Skippy. Stuart, in the ongoing saga of Tonight versus Poilievre, which one do you think is right?
Well, I am enjoying it with my popcorn, just like I think we always do. But I really think these conservatives need to get over this infighting because it happens every time. And I would just suggest there is an earnest debate going on right now. There was an earnest debate in the war room about what they should do. And there were concerns that if you jump into the Trump issue, you are making the liberal-friendly issue even more salient, and maybe you can swing a ballot question to something else. Maybe they had two bad options. Secondly, I would just say the Corey's argument that you can just take the Doug Ford template and run it federally, I think is crazy. And I do think we've maybe overestimated the Doug Ford juggernaut in that he's beaten Kathleen Wynne, Stephen Del Duca, and Bonnie Crombie. I mean, Stephen Del Duca was not the first choice of Liberal supporters in Ontario. It's nothing to sneeze at, winning 3 majorities. History is going to look very kindly on that. But let's not pretend that there was some strategic genius involved here. I think that what you're looking at federally is a country that's tilted towards the Liberals. And if you don't believe that now, I don't know what can convince you of that, because it just seems to me that the Conservatives need this real sweet spot where either the NDP is huge and the Liberals are less popular, so the vote split favors them, or they just have an affordability, pocketbook election that's right down in their wheelhouse, or they don't win. And they just need those two things, and otherwise, that's it. So I think sometimes when we look at this, we're maybe overanalyzing it a little bit, and that the playing field just tilted.
Do the debates matter on Wednesday and Thursday, and how much?
Short answer, yes, they do. I think they will matter for different reasons. I think the English debate will be the debate where you hear all the issues we talked about tonight. There'll be the character assassination juggernaut that Poilievre will bring against Carney to try and get him to be testy, get him to do all those reactions we were talking about earlier on matters of personal nature, and make this debate about anything but Trump. Exactly. They'll move it, try and move the needle. That will be the needle mover in English. In French, you're going to have issues of Quebec that could hurt the Liberals on Bill 96, Bill 21. Monsieur Blanchet is going to try and put Carney in a corner because he can with his French. There's no problem. And Carney's French is weak. But it's also a question of just those issues and raising those issues and raising doubt in Quebecers' minds to say, hey, maybe I should stay with the Bloc and keep parking my vote there. Yay, Quebec.
My weekly newsletter this week is about where the conservative panic meter is at, and is actually higher than I expected. I wasn't expecting it to be low, but it's even higher than I expected. And I asked some people, what about the debates? Are they going to swing things? And somebody pointed out to me that, first of all, they're structured to basically not make news. It's not designed so that you have these big moments. But secondly, if you look at the 2021 debate, the biggest news that came out of that was Sachi Curl from Angus Reid getting in trouble about some comments about Quebec, and that was the big news. So you just never quite know how these things are going to go. And the conservative I was talking to about this said, I'm not putting my hopes into the debates. I'm hoping for a Carney gaffe or maybe the NDP resurgence or something like that.
14 years ago in the debates, Jack Layton to Michael Ignatieff, if you want a promotion, you have to show up for work.
That was pretty good.
That was a pretty devastating line from Jack. It helped him.
I miss Jack.
I think that they both have to watch not to be angry, not to be testy. They both have that ability. They're very alike in that way. So they've got to keep it cool while trying to make the other guy not. We'll see if Jagmeet Singh is even relevant in this debate. We haven't even really talked about him. Although they've been putting out some of the good stuff on Carney and his taxes. It's just they're not getting the credit for it. They're the ones pushing it.
The last 2 years, Brian, pharmacare, dental care, the Liberals take all the credit.
Yeah, they got zero credit for those things. And it's like the Abacus data poll. Who do you credit for getting the carbon tax lowered? And most people said Mark Carney, not Pierre Poilievre. Well, realistically, it's Pierre Poilievre because the Liberals never would have done that if he didn't make it unpopular. And here's an example of Donald Trump helping Mark Carney again. Liberation Day, as he called his tariff day, Liberation Day saw the price of gas tank. And so the price of gas, since the carbon tax was lowered to zero, has really gone down. And I think a lot of Canadians are looking at it going, wow, Mark Carney made gas really cheap. I was at the Canada Strong and Free conference and talking with Premier Smith on stage. She said with the price of gas or price of oil dropping the way it has, 15 to 20%, Alberta was looking at a surplus. They could be looking at a $5 billion deficit because of how bad that is. But I will say, I don't know if either of you heard it. If you did, give me a quick reaction. I thought she gave a rah Team Canada speech at the event.
I thought she was sufficiently boring so not to hurt Poilievre's chances. I think she was really trying to not make news that would hurt Poilievre. And the thing she did that took my attention too was she took all these sort of pointy-headed conservatives to task for being at a conference and not out knocking on doors. So I think that might have been something they needed to hear.
Ouch.
All right. We will convene again after the debates and see how things stand at the end of the election. Good talking to you. And you two are the people behind the Political Hack newsletter. If you haven't subscribed to the Political Hack newsletter, do so now and get all the wonderful insights that you don't get, that we don't have time for in the podcast. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Brian.
Full Comment is a Post Media podcast. My name's Brian Lilly, your host. This episode was produced by Andre Proulx. Theme music by Bryce Hall. Kevin Libin is the executive producer. Please hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a rating, give us a review, and tell your friends about us. Thanks for listening. Until next time, I'm Brian Lilly.
Here's that clip from Canada Did What? I promised you. But the late 1960s, you have members of the Montreal Police who can spend their entire shift rushing from one FLQ bombing to another. Here's how New Year's Eve 1968 played out for Robert Cote, a member of the Montreal Police bomb squad, which put him at the forefront of fighting the FLQ during this period. He was supposed to be at home with his wife, who had just miscarried twin daughters. But instead, at 11 p.m., he's called out to Montreal City Hall to investigate a bomb that had just gone off. He's en route with sirens blaring when he's told, actually, don't bother with the exploded bomb. There's an unexploded bomb on the other side of City Hall you have to defuse. And then, right after snipping the wires on the City Hall bomb, Cote has to speed west where a third bomb has just exploded outside a federal building.
The bombing started in April and May of 1963. That's when the first bombings took place. And the mailbox bombings were the most famous part of the whole thing, which was basically on the Thursday night and Friday night leading into the Victoria Day weekend in 1963. So, and initially they started attacking these symbols of federalism, federal institutions, whether it was the Montreal Post Office or Revenue Canada. But the bombings escalated as time went on in terms of the size of the bombs and the powerfulness of these bombs.
If you want to hear the rest of the story, make sure you subscribe to Canada Did What? Everywhere you get your podcasts.